Hey there, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Christine up in Michigan. And boy, these economic Hunger Games, or shall we say the historic economic recovery, the hits keep getting worse. And I'm glad you reached out to me, Christine. You are one of many who lost their jobs during the pandemic. With that, your health care and other benefits. But in your case, there were promises made to you that have not been honored. Can you kind of explain, take us back during the pandemic, what happened?
Um, this was in the beginning of the pandemic, and well, at first, of course, my parents were in their late 80s, so they had to be isolated, just like everybody was in the beginning part of it. But I worked as a teller in a banking system, and they had to close down. So there wasn't enough room inside for everyone to be 6 feet apart. So they came to us and asked for us, some of us, if we would go on a layoff, take unemployment, which made sense because we can't all be there. And I chose to do that because my parents were elderly and they were going to need someone to get groceries for them. Neither of them drove. That way there was limited people going in and out,
Hmm.
at that time, if you can remember back. So it made sense. But what happened is during that time, both my parents got COVID, and I was still on laid off on unemployment. My mom ended up in the hospital and she passed away from COVID. So that
Sorry to
left
hear
my,
that.
yeah. And that was hard. And it was, I kind of tried to appreciate that I could be there during that time on unemployment. But then I had to kind of take care of my dad. But when they called me back after quite a while, and things started going back into that we're going to open up again at work, they didn't honor their promise that they would call me back. And if you remember, it was also on TV that if you got laid off, you'll go right back to your job. It was kind of talked about that way. They didn't. They offered me, I had left a full-time job with health benefits finally, because I worked part-time most of the time as a teller through my career. I mean, they didn't offer full-time jobs. I had just gone over $15 an hour at the
Wow.
end of my working career, just.
And how long
And
were you at the bank that it took to get there?
well, I worked at different banks through my career, but I had always been a teller since I graduated high school in
Okay.
1979. Yeah. So they were only offering me part time. I had to be able to work. They were open Monday, actually a Sunday too. I always worked the weekends for them. Before that, on my full time, I had Thursdays off. But what they wanted was me to be available Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, and work the weekends all the time, but only part time with no health care benefit anymore.
Wait, they wanted you to be available to work Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and they'll kind of call you when they need you
Yes. Hmm.
and work the weekends.
Always work the weekends.
So basically, you have no life, no ability to plan anything, no ability to get another job because you don't know when you're going to be called in.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
And
I,
what was the reason they gave why they wouldn't hire you back full time?
well, I didn't get a clear reason on it. They just said they were starting back up that way, but I didn't want to accept that, of course. One of the big things in banking that had happened, this is like a little history on it. When I first started, when I was 18 years old, you did not need any degree to work in banking. In fact, most people came in as a teller and worked their way up through the banking system. Um, so I had done that, and I had a full-time job with health benefits, with retirement. When I had children, and this would be 1986, 1988, I chose to stay home with them for a couple years. And then when I came back, it came back to part time at that time in the 80s. So this is where I say the middle class has been getting eaten away at, you know, since then, because they would put it into two part time jobs because then they didn't have to pay for health benefits for anyone.
Hmm.
Um, Now, at the end of my career here, I had negotiated to get that full time job. I had been there 13 years. I actually got robbed as teller at one point, and
Wow.
I wasn't able to work because I was too afraid for a while. But I didn't get to take time off with pay. They sent it to workers' comp, and workers' comp didn't want to start paying me in case I had a permanent problem.
Hmm.
So I had to take time off without pay because there was no way. It made no sense. It was terrible at that time.
So you got robbed as a teller at the bank that laid you off, and then
It was the previous bank I worked at. That's
okay,
why I was only at this one for 13 years. I kind of had to start over at the bottom
I
when I
see.
finally did go back.
I see.
This is where I get mad at corporations because they treat you this way, you know?
Right.
So I had started over and had just gotten up to the $15. So I did not want to take that part-time job again with no health benefits.
Right.
When
Of course.
I was in 1986, when I had my kids, when I came back, they had divided jobs up. If anyone retired, they always hired 2 part-time people. So they didn't have to pay the health benefits anymore. So that was a common thing. And that's why I say I had to kind of fight to get a full-time job. I had to tell them I would work every weekend and take Thursdays off. Could I have a full-time job? Like, could I be put to full-time? They were making me work over 30 hours for part-time anyway.
Hmm.
I thought that was all wrong, but I was stuck in it, you know?
Right. So tell me, I mean, bank teller, I'm sure you weren't, stuffed with money under your pillow. So being laid off during the pandemic and then not hired back, how has this affected you as far as, I assume, having to drain savings and things like that?
I yes, I started to work for out of my home, kind of like the gig worker stuff they call now, because I was kind of desperate. So I started to work for Rover. That's pet sitting out of my
Hmm.
home. But when I started a year ago, they took 15% off the top. But right away, they got bought out by an investment company, I guess. And they changed it to that they take 20% off the top. And so then that reduced it right away. And I also have to pay my own taxes and everything else out of there. So you might as 30% of it has to come out because I have to pay my own way now after I get that. And I only made $4,000 last year. Now I still had some unemployment money, you know, so that helped me last year. But now I'm in this situation. Because when you get laid off, you can take your retirement out early without a penalty, which seems like a good thing. Because I only had like $57,000 in my retirement, you know, that's all I was able to save. But I did buy my own home a few years ago, and for like just over 60,000, which I live in a rural area. I'm really lucky, you know, that I could buy a small home that way. But I took my money out of my retirement now to pay off my house so that I can not have my house taken away from me in the future because I don't know where income's going to come from. So now I
Hmm.
don't have any retirement. So even though that's a good thing, I'm supposed to be lucky, I also don't have any retirement left just so that I don't go homeless.
Yeah.
And
So
I, I
basically, they sucked you in and spit you out during COVID, and you've had to drain whatever life savings you've had to avoid homelessness. So technically, it's good to be able to buy off your house, but where's the money going to come for food prices, gas, healthcare costs? It's a challenge.
taxes, insurance on the house, having a
Mhm.
vehicle because I live in a rural area. It's kind of a big problem. Yeah, there's a lot that I'm thinking about now. I'm only 60 years old. I have 2 more years before I can get Social Security, and when I looked into that, I will only get, because of my low wages, I'll only get about $700, and probably about 200 of it will come off to pay for Medicare. That comes out of your Social Security now. when you get Social Security.
Yeah.
So, and you have to pay for Part B. You should pay for Part D for prescriptions, even if you're not needing them right now, because they'll charge you more later if you don't go on it now. I've
Yeah.
been figuring all this stuff out. I'm really good. I was a bank teller, so I tried to understand. But the thing I want people to understand is like the middle class, I believe, just it doesn't exist. It's kind of fake to me. And the reason I say that is because I saw everybody's paychecks. I saw everybody's money my whole life. I know what it was like when I graduated in, 79. The people who owned houses and that they didn't have credit cards. They didn't have credit card debt. They didn't have big loans for their houses. They had less wages, but they were able to live at a much higher level. And what I see now in the middle class is tons of credit card debt, high loans, and that never get paid off because they need another car by the time, it just doesn't. And it seems like everybody's so proud that they wouldn't want to talk about that. They're trying to say they're middle class like their parents were middle class, but it's a different diminishing middle class. I've been able to see that. So I work, politically or whatever. I still try to I'm against, corporate greed. So it seems to
And
come people everywhere.
And I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume because I've spoken with other people, 60 and up, that it's not easy to find a full-time job because age
No,
discrimination.
no, I found that too. It's not that I didn't try to look somewhere else, and especially online. Everything's everything's online. So I did try those things, but I didn't get any calls back, and I just kind of resigned myself to that. I'll just try to make it this way. You know what I'm doing? I'm practicing living the cheapest way I can. I
Right.
have some money in case of an emergency. That's what I mean about being a little lucky, you know? Like I have $7,000 left if my furnace breaks or my something, but I'm also knowing that could be gone in a half a year or a year if I even lived really cheaply. And so I'm practicing. Like I had no spend January and now no spend March. I had to spend some money in February. I'm trying to figure out, how do you do this?
Right.
Because I actually care and I'm not just, I was middle class. I don't know.
And, psychologically, it must be pretty crushing and upsetting when you work, for 40 years, save up, believe you're going to get a little rest and dignity in retirement. But through pandemic greed and other measures, you're kind of like, does all that seem like it was washed away?
It does. I try to have I try to have the attitude that I I'm gonna try to figure it out ahead of time. But I can see that that's dwindling down, and I can see where people get kind of desperate feeling.
Yeah.
I do have some family. I have two daughters that are in their 30s. Of course, would not ever want to have to live with them. Would I do it if I had to? Of course I would, but it doesn't seem right. I don't I I don't know what to do about it other than trying to get people to understand that this is a major problem, that money has been taken away from the middle class, and they're not the only ones. I think a lot of people don't talk about it because their pride probably. They think they're the only ones with that much debt. I actually don't have debt. I I saw this years and years ago. So, 2008. Before 2008, I was a teller and I was taking in the payments from people, and I was seeing people had balloon loans. that now their interest rate went up, and I was just like, how can they afford these? And I also questioned why the loan officers were giving out the loans at that. Why would they let the houses sell for that high amount when they know nobody can really pay that back, or they'll be paying on it for their entire lives? And I questioned it, and then everybody saw what happened in 2008, and then it was like, oh, there was a problem, and I kind of see it happening again now too.
And
I don't know. I try not to be down because I don't want. I joined the Democratic Party, and I tried to get on the inside to help push them to stop focusing on corporations and the money they get from corporations.
I'm sure that worked out well in Michigan, huh?
It doesn't. But I became one of the thorns in their side, and I'm at the meetings, and I'm on the state central committee, and it surprised me that I could figure out how to get up there from my rural spot. Yes, I do have people telling me that I should be quiet and not talk about this, but I won't. I do know what I'm talking about. I do know.
You have Democratic Party officials there in the state party basically telling you, keep this to yourself, these issues?
Yeah, it's not the time for them. It's, that we're supposed to work together. They see me as someone who's not working together, but I am, and I'm actually working for democracy. They're blocking democracy from what I see. So I fight against that because it is a way, and I love all the outside groups too. I love all the outside groups that are working on it, that got disgusted with the Democratic Party and are working in other ways. But I think that I'm trying to help to fix the inside of the Democratic Party so we're all working together. I don't know if that will help.
You might need 2 or 3 lives to accomplish that. Sorry to hear that, because I know Michigan well from reporting in Flint and elsewhere, and it's just a corrupt cesspool. But I want to ask you last question. You got the president out there calling this a historic economic recovery, citing GDP and the stock market, and unemployment claims are at historic lows, even though, they took people off unemployment. What does that say to you when you're dealing with all this? Who's the economy historic for?
The people who during the pandemic were kind of put off because they couldn't go out and do what they normally did, but they had enough money, and now they're back to being able to live their lives. But that was getting to be less and less of a group, more of a smaller group before the pandemic. And unemployment, I've never believed the levels of unemployment, because I just know so many of people my age who have their grown children that live with them that haven't had a job in years, and they fell off that unemployment thing long ago. I mean, they're not counted anywhere. They can't be. So it's just like a shadow bunch of people that no one ever really claims to any group, right? They're not counted. And no, I don't think I'm counted. I had unemployment during that, but I fell off. What am I? How am I counted? Am I counted as unemployed, or just went into the nothing category?
You're counted as, one of these people benefiting from the historic economic recovery that, because you're not the only one that's been laid off during the pandemic and either told you'd be hired back, but you weren't, or have had to get multiple jobs, not to mention other people who went into debt significantly during the pandemic. So your problem, from what I've been told by others, it's pretty common, even though we're kind of told this pandemic is over and, we're coming, people are back to work, the president said.
Yeah. I had one more thing I wanted to share with you, if you'll let me. I've always been a union person. I have never been in a union, but I've always believed in unions. it started in high school. I wrote a report about child labor, and I was shocked as a high schooler that there was such a thing, you know. And then that led me. Now, in my family, there's been people who have been able to be in unions, and you know, but I never have. But my grandmother, there's an article I have here that was in the paper back in 1946. So that's just 2 generations ago. And my grandfather worked in the iron ore mines here. So they were forming their union and they were striking. But I'll just read a couple little excerpts from it. This part says, "This last Christmas time proved to us beyond any question of doubt that it is impossible to live on 90 cents per hour." That's how much my grandpa was making. And then later on in the article, it says, "When my husband told me his union was negotiating with the mining company for a $2 a day increase in pay, my spirits went up. For that is what it would take. We agreed to keep the wolf from the door. $2 more a day." So, you know, and I just see that they did not give anything away. You know, like without a union, they wouldn't have got more pay. But the next part here says, "The night my husband voted to strike, this is what he said. Ruth, we are gradually slipping into the hole. It can't go on like this much longer. We've got to force the mining company to grant our demands. Do you agree?" I'm sorry, it makes me emotional now. My answer was yes. My answer was yes, with no supplies on hand. My answer was yes, even when I knew that all income would cease. My answer was yes, for I too knew the time for action had come, and if a fight for justice was necessary, I was prepared to help in that fight, no matter what the sacrifice might be. So at the end of the article here, then, I mean, she was on a radio program too at the time in 1946, but this article was written after she was on that radio program. She's talking about the mining company officials coming around to the mothers, the wives, coming to the house to try to convince them to tell their, you know, husbands to go back to work. "Mothers and wives, beware the mining company officials' appeals. They are only trying to break the strike through the softness of our mothers' hearts. But mining officials forget, beside having a heart, we wives also have brains. We knew that our husbands' demands must be met. 18.5 cents an hour was not our husband's original demand. The 18.5 cent raise is our compromise. A compromise backed by the President of the United States, endorsed by the entire country. It is our minimum need and demand. I urge all wives, all mothers of striking miners, stand by your husbands and sons in this their hour of our need. Encourage them to victory, their victory, our victory, and our children's victory." Now, I see it as my grandparents definitely got a victory for their children, okay? Which would be, but now, now the next generation, me, the corporations and companies are taking that all back and trying to take away from any workers. So I stand with anybody who's trying to form a union or be in a union. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you for that. That's really powerful. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.